Actually, less than 1% of all the people in Japan are Christian. As missionaries, the gens are responsible for covering the Tohoku region, which is comprised of 6 of the most northern prefectures, what we might think of as states, on the main island of Japan. Here you can see Ruth and I, and in the background, Hirosaki, the town they're from. It's predominantly, as you can see, a rural area, famous for the abundance of foods and other natural products found in their oceans and mountains. We saw many apple orchards. This was a walk that Ruth would take on mornings she could, at least once or twice a week. And so we saw the apple orchards there, fruit orchards, lots of them, rice paddies inland, and squid boats at the Sea of Japan. Hirosaki is the northernmost prefecture of Aomori, the town where the gents live, and built Nozomi Church there, their second church plant. We went in June for 2 weeks, which is the rainy season, but there was no lack of work for us inside or out. Mount Iwaki is the volcano we see from the church's kitchen window. This is kind of a close-up of it. It's 5,330 feet high and last erupted in 1862, so I don't think we had too much to worry about. One weekend, we went up by car, 69 hairpin turns later, hoping to take the lift to the base of the summit. The clouds moved in. So we didn't go on the lift, but some people did and continued to hike the 40 minutes more to the top. On the way down the backside of the mountain, heading toward the Sea of Japan, we went through one of the world's largest primeval beech forests, which is now a protected area. This isn't the beech forest, but it's on the walk we did, and they're really nice, tall, beautiful trees, nevertheless. It made the beech forest made the World Heritage List. A little about their religion, because Japanese consider themselves, most people consider Japan a Buddhist country, but they do have 2 main religions, Shintoism and Buddhism. Shintoism is purely a Japanese religion. Shinto gods are considered sacred spirits which take the form of things and concepts important to life for them, like the wind, rain, mountains, trees, and fertility, etc. They believe humans also become these sacred spirits after they die and are revered by their families. So normal Shinto shrines are connected with ancestor worship. We saw a few of these. Right here's a gate called Tori, and they're found in front of old houses, but almost all Shinto shrines. This was, the white one earlier was the one on the hill behind the Nozomi Church. Shrine buildings tend to be simple in appearance. They are designed for worshiping the gods, not for preaching by priests. Komai Inu are statues, 2 stone statues in front of the shrines, you can see here, of mythical guardian beasts resembling lions, said to ward off evil. These guys here aren't Komainu, but they are still a little scary looking, and we're at the shrine. The inner sanctuary is for symbolic objects of worship and priests. The public isn't welcome there, but in the outer hall, we saw worshipers throw some coins in like a collection box, pull a rope with small bells attached, clap twice to get the attention of the gods, and then pray with their hands lifted. We didn't actually see any Buddhist temples this year, but they are distinguished by more flamboyant designs than the Shinto shrines, notably having statues, bell towers, and pagodas. What you're seeing here is a little stand outside of both shrines and temples. They are called omikuji, or divine fortunes, sold for a small fee. Ruth described them as wishes, written on paper, tied to thin ropes or holders like this one. Nowadays, most Japanese people identify themselves both as Buddhists and Shintoists, not actually interested in religious beliefs, but rather they practice religion for the function it serves in their lives. So it's not unusual for a person to go through 3 sets of religious rites within a lifetime: a Shinto dedication at birth, a Christian-style white wedding, and a Buddhist funeral. The truth of religion is secondary, so in such a context, the task of preaching the gospel of Christ as the only way to salvation presents a huge challenge. So that leads to our work. We started right away after arriving and being introduced to the other short-termers already there. Everyone had a job to do. I was privileged to cook again for the team this year, feeding anywhere from 11 to 25 people for lunch and dinner. But I had a helper this year. Her name was Alisa, a short-termer from Hong Kong. The whole team there was from all over the world. James and Sean started by constructing cabinets for the kitchen. That's actually what you're seeing now is Martin's office. So there's still lots of work to do. But the first weekend actually came quickly for us because we arrived midweek. Saturdays and Mondays were our days off. Sundays were for worship and outreach. On our first day off, we got to see some fireworks. I don't have any pictures, but they are a special attraction of summer. Japanese techniques for fireworks are probably the most sophisticated and beautiful in the world. And Sean, this is part of the community gardens behind the church, but Sean and the rest of the short-termers went to a fireworks festival in the evening. We adults, Martin and Ruth, James and I went to one of the gents' friends' home to have dinner and watch from afar. We ate, we talked, we looked at Keiko's art, the lady of the house. Ruth has paintings by her that decorate the cabins in Sendai that Sean will talk a little bit about. This happens to be a thank you card from her with a little watercolor she did. We listened to her husband play the piano for us. He also plays for the worship service. We prayed with and for each other. We watched the fireworks that night with some neighbors and returned home. When the youth dressed up for the fireworks festival, they all wore special kimonos called yukata. Sean will have pictures, and I think James too, of that. Yukata differs from the regular kimonos because they are worn directly over the skin with no lining. They're actually more casual than kimonos, worn mostly to fireworks displays, summer festivals, dance festivals, and so on. And as you will see when Sean and James talk about that, they are quite popular with foreign tourists too, namely us. So personally, when I wasn't cooking, eating out was just fine with me. Let's see. I like Japanese food. Soft ice cream seemed popular there. This was actually at a restaurant, a pancake restaurant. We were mixing our batter. It was dinner, but they served everything from breakfast to dinner, and they were all pancakes. You cooked them on a hot plate in front of you at your table. This was actually a table on the floor, but there was a hole under the table, so you could sit as you were, like you were sitting in a chair, so you wouldn't get all cramped up. Here's a restaurant we went on, I think the end of our last weekend, or our last weekend there maybe, where we went to a hot springs spa, and they had a restaurant there that served bear and deer. So it was a little tough, but okay. And soft ice cream for dessert seemed popular there. They had all these little ice cream shops all over, flavored for Japanese tastes, of course, like green tea or melon. I had to try the squid ink cone, and it tasted like vanilla. So not bad. It just looked gray. So the impact, how did this all impact our team? As short-termers, we all used our unique gifts to help the gents, the long-termers, with projects in and around the church that needed completing. But because of the help we provided, the gents could more fully devote themselves to their work, like discipling and preaching. Me personally, it was hearing testimonies almost daily about how God was working in everyone's lives. How encouraging that was. It was amazing. I got to share a part of mine one-on-one, but it was another short-termer that thanked me one morning for the impact that I had on her life this trip. I can't think what I said or what I did to her, for her, specifically, but God knows. I'm amazed by the gents too. Just observing their faithfulness, perseverance, and intentionality in all they do, living for Jesus daily and genuinely, just impressed me so much. I watched them not only minister to Japanese people who showed up at church or at outreaches, but to us short-termers too. They were helping us grow as disciples of Jesus. Amazing. Every morning, they were excited to start their day in prayer. At devotions, Martin would ask joyfully, "Who's thankful?" A scripture that kind of emphasizes this is Psalm 96. "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods." So who's thankful? I am. And I know that Sean is. So I'll let him take over.
So I'm going to start off talking about how Japan impacted my life, and then I'm going to get into the pictures and explain those. I want to thank you all so much for your support on this trip. It was truly an adventure, tiring yet full of exciting moments. I was constantly fully focused, trying to grasp everything that was going on around me so that I could understand what was happening and experience Japan and the people worshiping God to the fullest. It was definitely eye-opening, seeing the love and passion that the gents and the team showed toward God. I was surprised to see people my age so focused on having God as their main focus in life, because throughout high school and college, I have seen so little of it that I guess I forgot about all the times that I experienced it in the past. Like when I used to worship at Monadnock. It seemed like everyone was so energetic and happy too, and recently I was feeling kind of the opposite of that. I figured that they were like this because they had God in their lives. So I started talking to them about God and asking to hear their testimonies. I was so intrigued by the stories they told me about what God's done in their lives that I decided that I wanted to seek God out more myself so that I may see what he decides to do in my life, and that I might be able to share my testimonies in the future with kids who are stuck like I am, not knowing God or what path to take and where to find happiness. Though I am not as stuck as I was. Now that I am seeking God, I am praying more and doing devotions every day, thanks to one of my team members I'll show you later. And I do my best to believe that God is actually in control of my life, and that with faith, he will show me which paths I should take. I also believe that God may be answering some of my prayers. I'm not quite sure if he is, but maybe. I'm definitely happier than I was, and I feel like I have so much I can do now that I'm never feeling lost. I'm starting to change myself for the better with God's strength and I feel great. So I'm thankful to, I'm so thankful to have met everyone I did in Japan as well. They cared so much about me and did so much for me, and they're still doing things for me today. I'm blessed to have so many people in my life that are truly there for me whenever I need them. Okay, so on to more of like the trip now. So the time it took to get there was fun. Not really. It's a good thing. I'm a really patient person, because if I wasn't, I probably would have lost my mind, because the trip was so long. Anyway, fast forwarding to when we arrived in Japan, it was late at night and we were all tired and packed into the gents, like little box car they had, and we started driving on the wrong side of the road. And I probably would have freaked out a little bit if no one had told me beforehand that was like a norm there. But for those of you who didn't know, in Japan, they drive on the left side of the road. When we got to their house and got into our rooms, we slept on mats and did so for the whole time we were there. And they were quite comfortable. And I got probably some of the best sleep on those mats. So the next morning, when we woke up, we started devotions, which we also did every morning with the orientation team, which this was devotions. Martin is the little head popping out, like with the glasses at the very left. And then the rest of the people are kind of just the short-termers. So there's quite a lot of them. Nathan, the guy who got me into doing devotions, is the one like right in the middle of the table, looking down at the book, right in between the two tall guys. Okay, so next slide. Oh, okay. So my mom had a picture of a scarecrow in her slides, but these are just like the little scarecrows in the park behind where we stayed. This is during orientation. I went with some of the other short-termers, and Martin had set up this little like I guess hunt for just like things in the area, so that we could like get familiar with the area and take pictures. And so they had really nice trees, and yeah, it was a great view. Great views, definitely. That was, what was the mountain called again? Huh? If you could hear her, what she said. This was, I don't know, I thought it was a nice picture, like sun was setting. Okay, these are the team members, or the other short-termers. Yeah, we're just doing like selfies and stuff. That's Ben. He's super tall. Yeah, Nate. So that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Snapchat, but Nate sent a picture of me, like, and then I did one of him. So getting into some of the work I did in Japan. I forget what this is called actually, but we were working on the cabinet doors, and this is a final or finished product. Um, then I got the task of ironing yukatas, and my mom explained the yukatas are like the robes for everyone for the festival that we went to. This is when I was outside digging up the ground to put gravel on top of it to make like a path so they could cement it over and do that. There used to be a big tree where that sign was, and a lot of grass and roots and everything. And as you can see, like it's changed a lot because there's a sign there and there's flowers. So we did all that. It's a picture of my mom cooking. This was late night cafe or midnight cafe. But we had people visit the church, and we just did like a little cafe time with them and talked with them and had snacks and cookies and stuff. And we also did dishes. This was just something that was in the onsen there, and the onsen is like a hot spring. It was really nice, but that's another thing that was there. It's a mountain from the park, I believe. This, Nate, David, and I went into the park one day, and there were a bunch of kids playing basketball, so we somehow like managed to get a game going on with them, and that was really fun. His name is Anju. He goes to the church quite a bit, I'd say. And oh, these are the yukatas. So this was a guy who ran the corner store that we had there, where we like shopped for most of his stuff, or most of the groceries. I really liked him because he was a really nice guy, so I decided to draw a picture for him, and that's how it came out. And that was him receiving it, so he looked pretty happy, I think, which made me feel great. Just pictures, I don't know, cool pictures, I guess, I took. I really liked that tree, so I thought that was cute. I had to put that in. This is the view from the deck at Sendai, which is, we stayed in a cabin there right before we went home. So this was, I think, maybe the day or the morning after we got to the Sendai cabin. We went on a boat trip, and or like boat tour of like the islands that they have around, and it was pretty cool. It wasn't in Sendai, but they have another church, and we went there for lunch before going home, and this was the lunch that was prepared for us, so I think that was dessert. I'm eating dessert. And this was the last dinner that we had before coming home, so this is dollar store in Japan, dollar store shopping. That was me when we got to Canada after leaving Japan, so it's a long trip. Is that okay? So Yeah, that concludes my journey in Japan, and I thank you all again so much for letting me be able to go, and your prayers. It was a life-changing experience for sure, and without your help, I would have never been able to experience any of it. So, thank you very much.
Good morning again. Just a little explanation. I have a broken rib, and I tell you that not to give an excuse for what I say here or not to make you feel sorry for me, but I know that some of you are going to be out there spending the whole time thinking, why is he moving so strangely? And so anyway, and then why does he have this? It's because I can't get a deep breath, so I asked for a microphone so I could talk softly. I'd like to show you some of the work that I did in Japan and tell you about some of the outreaches we did as a group. The church is located in a renovated warehouse. The first floor has a sanctuary and a kitchen, and the second floor of the church has living space. And you can see here they have a quite nice kitchen, a commercial-style kitchen. In order to pass code, though, that open kitchen shelving needed to be closed in, so Martin had me work on that. A lot of the kitchen was open shelving, and I first built out the shelves so that it could accommodate doors. And then Sean and I, there's this built-out shelving, then Sean and I helped make the doors. This is a tongue and groove cedar doors in process, and later on we hung the doors, and then, later on we hung the doors, and then Ruth Gent stained the doors, and actually they came out quite good, I think. There's another view, a couple of views here. Martin also wanted to replace a table in the foyer with a cabinet to be used for storage. And here the project is just started. And then here's the foyer cabinet taking shape. And I finished this foyer cabinet just before we left. So that's at the entryway of the church. Here my young friend Moses, he's presenting the new cabinet. Moses was, he's Hong Kong descent, but he was from Toronto. He provided me with some great entertainment. I was finishing up this project, and he was standing on the floor. I was sitting on the floor painting overhead on the inside of these doors and stuff. And so he was right at eye level with me, and he kept commenting on different things and asking a lot of questions. And he says, "Boy, you have a lot of gray hair." And then he says, "Is it your gray hair that makes you so fat?" And I said, "Well, I never really considered that, but maybe he's onto something. There might be a connection there." So, yeah, he was a fun guy. We had a good time. I have to admit, I had the great job. I got to build stuff while Sean was forced to dig ditches, and Robin had to slave over the hot stove. And anyway, that's what we did for physical work. The Japanese church service was very small and informal, a lot like this, only a little bit more modern building. You would have recognized the tunes to at least half the songs we sang. A lot of them were hymns and some praise songs. And at the middle back of the church, you see there's a table set up for kids to work quietly during the service. Ruth told me that one thing they purposely did was they attempted to make the church as accessible as possible to young kids and for young parents with young kids. And so this is one of the things they did is that you could bring your kids, they would sit in the back at the table, and everyone could hear the service. Every Sunday after church, they had a simple meal they put together. This is important because the Christians in Japan are very few and far between, so they didn't usually want to go home after the service. They wanted to stick around. This became sort of their family because a lot of believers lose their family support once they turn to Christ. Even Sean came to eat with us here. Another common outreach they host is, I'm going to say about some of the outreaches we did. This is a Filipino cooking class. They host cooking classes quite often, and this class, like I said, is about learning to make Filipino foods. The 3 short-term Filipino girls were great teachers, and everybody had a good time making the food. And of course, afterwards, they all sit down to enjoy it. And while they cooked and ate together, I can tell you they talked about a lot of stuff, but they definitely talked about Jesus. I only got to come in and take their picture, then I got kicked out. But I know they had a lot of good conversations about Jesus and the Christian life. But that's biblical, isn't it? Food, conversation about Jesus. Another outreach they had was called English Cafe. On Friday night, they invited high school students to come and have snacks, which Robin helped cook, and they practiced speaking English. And the kids had some good times together, laughing, and at the end, of course, the girls decided to have a hair braiding party on their own. So everything they did, though, was geared towards reaching out to the community. On Sunday, Sean showed you some of these pictures. On Sunday afternoon, some of the short-term guys went up and started playing basketball with some of the local kids. This is at the park, which is right next door, and there's Sean on defense. While these kids played ball, one of the girls that had come along with the boys walked on over to the church, which was just a few hundred feet away, and she came in for a church tour. And I saw one of the younger missionary couples take her around and show her the facilities and invite her to things and tell her about Jesus and what they were doing there. So what a great way to have outreach. And of course, after the basketball, fun at the fountain. And even Robin got in on the fun here. So every Friday morning, Ruth scheduled an hour walk in the foothills with a lady she had gotten to know. And this Friday, they invited me to go along. So I went along and took pictures. They conversed in Japanese, so I had no idea what they were talking about. But at one point, they stopped, and Ruth told me she was recounting my testimony to her friend. I was like, what? Okay. But many Japanese believers need to hear about Jesus like this for years before they come to faith. You can stay on that last slide. One Japanese man I know, I got to know a little bit. He told me that he attended church for 10 years before he came to faith and got baptized. And the reason that he told me that he finally decided to follow Jesus, he had watched Martin and Ruth go through some very difficult and trying times. And he watched how they reacted and how they dealt with difficult situations. And their behavior throughout that time proved out what they believed. And he said, I want to give my life to Jesus. 10 years of watching them. Before they came to Japan, the 3 Filipino girls knew that they would be hosting an outreach called Filipino Night. About 70 people showed up for this experience of Filipino Night. First, they ate food from the Philippines, and we had a full house here. You can see Martin and Ruth going around greeting everybody. And these 2 ladies, they sat across the table from me. Neither had ever been to a church before. This was their first time. So after eating, the Filipino girls, this is Lizelle, they gave their short testimonies. Lizelle talked about being abused by an older uncle when she was very young. And she talked about how Jesus enabled her to forgive and gave her the strength to tell her family about it many years after. She actually had come to Japan previously, and while there, Ruth and others helped her work through this experience. And she told about it. Her testimony was incredible. She just exudes the joy of her Christian life now. Her friend Therese also gave her testimony. Her parents, she said, expected perfection. As a child, when she brought home less than a 98% on a test or a quiz, she was forced to stay in a room and study all night because it wasn't perfect. Her parents enforced such a high standard that she didn't feel like they loved her unless she performed perfectly. She started cutting herself as a young woman and described how Jesus helped her to overcome that and to accept herself, feelings of inadequacy, and finally was able to accept herself as Jesus made her. And she's now studying to be a counselor, I believe. But their testimonies were incredible. And this is just one of the outreaches they did. And they focused on testimonies, which was really neat. After the testimonies, they demonstrated Filipino dancing, and they weren't perfect at it, but they had a great time. And they loved to show their joy. Oops, they're photobombed again there. This was our entire team for the 2 weeks we were there. I can't believe that Ruth and Martin had 20 short-termers there all at once, but they did, living in their house and above the church right there. They were from all over the world, the UK, Northern Ireland, the USA, Canada, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Germany, Philippines. Anyway, That was our team. Oh, I'm sure you're tired of my stories by now. So you probably feel like this guy. This guy, Josiah, is trying to get over jet lag at dinner time. And I hope you enjoyed our little trip to Japan. And we thank you for your kindness in sending us. Thanks. I know it's long, but I just want to share 5 minutes in the Bible today, okay? Why do we do short-term mission trips? Obviously, is it about building things? You know, I showed you what I did. Obviously, Martin could have hired somebody to build those cabinets for the airfare I spent. The same could be said for what Robin did. You know, they could have hired a cook with the money that we spent to get there. So why do we spend the time and the money to go to a faraway place to do a job that people could do themselves? I want to turn to the Bible to offer a few clues about the value of a short-term trip. Let's look at the book of Philemon. Philemon, if you don't know where that is, in your Pew Bible, it's page 1000. It's a little book just before the book of Hebrews, just after the letters to Titus, Timothy. Very short letter that Paul wrote. And I'm not going to get into all the things about Philemon and what he was, you know, why the letter was written and everything, but I just want to tell you a little bit about what Paul thought of Philemon, his friend. It's written to his friend Philemon, like I said, and right away we know two things about Philemon. He was Paul's good friend, and he worked alongside him in ministry. At the time he wrote the letter, Paul was a prisoner in Rome, and his friend Philemon was leading a house church in Colossae. That was 1,300 miles away. So they were a long distance apart, across Europe into what is now Turkey. So Paul and Philemon were time zones apart, but they were also from very different backgrounds. Paul was raised in a very strict Jewish community, and he was schooled in the Old Testament. He probably knew all the books of Moses by heart, whereas Philemon was a Gentile convert, and he knew nothing about the living God until one day he met Paul, who introduced him to Jesus. So their backgrounds were very different, and today we would call that like a cross-cultural relationship. So I want to present this as like a cross-cultural relationship that travels over time zones, Paul and Philemon. And that's sort of how I would describe our trip to Japan. We crossed many miles and changed cultures to see our beloved, like Paul says, our beloved fellow workers in Christ. And what did we hope to accomplish? Well, this is how Paul describes his prayer. Let's read a little bit in Philemon, just a few verses here. Starting in verse 4. He says he prays for Philemon, and then he sort of reminisces on what happened. Paul says, I always thank my God as I remember you in my prayers, because I hear about your love for all his holy people and your faith in the Lord Jesus. And I pray that your partnership with us in the faith may be effective in deepening your understanding of every good thing we share for the sake of Christ. Your love has given me great joy and encouragement because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the Lord's people. I love that last phrase. Maybe on my tombstone somebody will write, he refreshed the hearts of God's people. I can't think of anything too much better than that. That's just a great phrase. But there are two phrases I'd like to look at this morning. The first is Paul says their partnership together, he's praying that their partnership together may help deepen Philemon's understanding of his faith. And relationships between Christians, which bridges cultures and miles, can and should deepen our understanding of faith. If you've ever been here when Muhammad comes, you know what I mean. If you haven't met Muhammad, he's going to be here in October again, and don't miss it. But he was raised as a Muslim, and he was raised in a nomadic, herding society. And the experiences he shares with us about his Christian faith, as he came to faith, are just incredible. And whenever I hear him speak, I stand in awe of what God did in his life and what he's doing in Mali, where he lives. And sometimes when he's done speaking, I realize that my view of God has just changed, just a bit. he just, Muhammad tells me about God's majesty and God's power on display in ways I've never seen it before. And his testimony helps me see God more clearly for who he is. And I submit to you this morning that having a relationship with Christians in other cultures will help deepen your own faith. And I think that's what Paul means when he tells Philemon in verse 6, I pray that your partnership with us in the faith may be effective in deepening your understanding of every good thing that we share in Christ Jesus. So one of the goals of short-term missions that each of the participants, the host and the visitor, because of their partnership, should gain a deeper understanding of the blessings we share in Jesus. And one thing that should happen when Christians get together across cultural divides should be gaining a deeper understanding of their own faith. And the second thing I'd just like to talk about today for a couple seconds here, in verse 7, your love has given me great joy and encouragement because you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the Lord people. When Christians get together across time zones and across cultures, it should result in encouragement. I know that I was encouraged by my trip. I was encouraged to testify about God's work in my life more. I was encouraged to ensure each day that I dedicated my life to God's will and his work that he wanted to do. And I was encouraged to keep on living for Jesus. And I think Robin's and Sean's and my testimony, I hope, has encouraged you today as we shared our report. And we heard this morning about nomads in the Mideast, and I hope your heart was encouraged to see what God's doing there. We don't hear about these things in the news, but when we hear them from other Christians and can share it together, it should be and can be refreshing and encouraging. So the next time you hear about a short-term mission work, don't just judge it on what physically gets accomplished, the building, the cooking, whatever. You don't judge our church by what the trustees do around this building, and no more should you judge a mission trip by what gets done physically. But think about it in this way. Did this partnership help God's people develop a deeper understanding of Jesus? And 2, did this partnership result in the encouragement of God's people? Did it bring refreshment to God's people? I pray that your heart has been both challenged and encouraged and refreshed this morning, and that you understand God just a little bit better. Amen.